insert generic greeting here, and welcome to the revival of Storytimes. I hope my hands were in the correct position. I actually have the viewfinder off, so I don't know where anything is. But I don't want to end up not looking into the camera for 90% of this video again, so I guess that's what we're working with. Anyway, a couple of years ago actually, I don't know when I filmed my last proper story time, I started a series that I called Travel Storytimes, where I started telling stories from my travels. Duh. And I have this list of like dozens of stories. Today I'm gonna tell some that are not even on that list, so that's a great start. But I just kind of felt like doing these videos again, because it's actually kind of fun to talk about these experiences and look back at travels and be like, oh, yeah, that happened. So today, as the title says, I'm gonna spill some tea on some hotels. Well, I'm actually not gonna spill this tea, I'm gonna drink that, but... This was already stupid when I thought of saying this, and I still went with saying it. So that's great. This tea isn't even hot. I hate that. But anyway, let's talk about hotels. So first of all, in my most active travel time, which was between 2016 and 2019, so very, very early 20s, basically the beginning of my 20s, I had a lot of money available. And I'm still very privileged, but I was even more privileged then, which made me able to be traveling like 4 months a year. Crazily enough, back then I didn't even use hotels. Most of the time I was couch surfing pretty much anywhere, which is not really as actively usable anymore nowadays, from my understanding. I could be wrong on that, but I haven't really used it. And since I'm not really traveling alone anymore that much, couch surfing isn't the best thing to consider for me at this time. But either way, I didn't really have bad experiences with hotels at that time, because I didn't really ever stay in hotels. The first story that I'm going to talk about today, however, is bringing us to 2019, when I wasn't traveling alone anymore for the first time on a longer trip. And most of that trip was actually pretty fine, considering hotels. Like, I don't really have many bad stories from Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, or Iran, except that one. Now this story brings us to Nakhchivan, which is an exclave of Azerbaijan that is basically, you have Azerbaijan there, and then you have Armenia next to it, and then there's Nakhchivan. It's very strange geographically, and there's a lot of political history with it that I'm not gonna go into, because I'm not educated enough to talk about that. Funnily enough, the video about Nakhchivan is, I think, my video with the most organic views on my entire account, which is kind of crazy to me, because that was back when we didn't really have proper filming equipment. We had the camera I'm using, but we didn't have the gimbal, so there was no stabilization, so feel free to watch that video. There's cool material in there, but it's kind of headache-inducing to watch. So, for the day we spent in Nakhchivan, we had a guide, which was, strangely enough, the owner or the manager of the hotel we were staying in. I don't even know how we got in contact with him, I think through booking.com, but I'm not sure anymore. And that day was fantastic, the dude was really cool. He showed us a lot of great places, and in my memory he didn't really want a lot of money for that either. So all in all, good experience. Until we got to the hotel. Now he wasn't working that day at the hotel. He was working as our tour guide though. I don't really know how that worked. I don't know if he did that in his free time or something like that. The problem with that is in the hotel, no one was really able to communicate with us properly. I don't remember it exactly anymore, but there was definitely a level of language barrier. And I'm not sure why we didn't communicate with Google Translate, because we did later on the same trip actually. But I do remember we had to call the manager or owner or whoever the guy was at least once during the whole ordeal, because there was definitely an issue with the employees, and I don't remember what it was anymore, to be honest. Again, 2019 is a few years ago. But when we got to the hotel, everything seemed fine. The hotel looks really fancy from the outside, and again, we had a really good day. We were in a positive mood until we checked into our room. Now the main issue was next to the hotel there was some very loud party going on. I'm not sure if it was a club or some festival outside thing or whatever it was. It was very freaking loud. So you couldn't really open the window because you would be unable to sleep. And I do remember that it was quite late actually, and we were tired and we were planning to stand up very early in the next morning, so we had to sleep. Now, one would think use the AC. It didn't work. In my memory, it didn't work in the entire hotel. And it was a massive hotel. The AC was just completely broken. And it was very freaking hot. So, not having the window open and no AC was definitely not an option. So then we went downstairs to inquire about getting a different room. And I think that's when we had to call the owner or the manager. For some reason, they couldn't just give us a different room. Even though, and that's even funnier to me, pretty much all the rooms were empty. Because when we got to our new room, which was luckily on the other side of the hotel, which made opening a window and still sleeping possible, we walked by dozens of unlocked, empty rooms. So, first of all, putting us into a different room should have been a no-brainer to begin with. I think they were arguing with us about just opening the window for a while, actually. And while everything resolved fine in the end, it was also very strange to me that every single room was unlocked. That's a weird policy to have in your hotel. Also, the new room we got brought into didn't have towels. I think we didn't even have duvets and pillows. Because I do remember we walked to our old room and got them to bring to the new room. But some of the unlocked rooms also had them. So I don't really know. It was very strange. It's also strange when you're brought to a new room and the new room just doesn't have pillows or towels and the employee just walks away and that's the end of the conversation. Do you want to do your job or what are we doing here? Because that's something I also remember from that hotel. All the employees seemed uninterested in talking to us in the first place, ignoring the language barrier, just all in all. And they were just on their phone all the time. I never worked in hotels, but I'm pretty sure if you would do that in Germany, you would get fired very quickly. I also feel like it was one of the most expensive hotels we had on the entire trip. But it resolved fine, so whatever. Now moving on, the second hotel I want to talk about didn't really leave us with a bad experience. More like just a very freaking weird one. Well, both actually, now that I think about it. Macedonia, summer of 2021. It was basically our next big trip because in 2020 we didn't really want to leave the country. Didn't really feel like a thing one should do, but in 2021, again, if you were isolating enough, for me personally, it felt okay again. So we went to the Balkans. And again, most of the trip went completely fine. But there was this one hotel in Macedonia, which was actually advertised as being in an old monastery, which sounded really cool. And the second we got there, it was all very confusing. There's the main road, and you have parking spaces there, and then there's a slow incline towards a very fancy hotel restaurant complex thing. So we were almost driving into there, but it looked all very private-ish. So then we decided to drive all the way up the mountain, because up the mountain you have the actual new monastery, and then on the other side, I think there was another building tagged as a hotel, and we weren't really sure if the fancy restaurant thing was supposed to be our hotel or the thing up top. So we drove up top and saw this relatively newly looking building that also you could have thought was a monastery, but it didn't really look like an old monastery, just like a monastery. And then the other side you had the gate and the walkway to the actual monastery, which we knew that this wasn't the place we were supposed to stay in. We really felt like it was the hotel monastery looking thing on the other side of the hill. Now we didn't know what to do, cause nothing looked like an entrance really, and it also looked very freaking empty. There were cars if I recall correctly, but not a lot of them. And it just didn't feel correct to go inside that building. So what we then did is walk towards the actual monastery, which was way past visiting times actually, or like at the very end of visiting times. And we were just walking about trying to find somebody. Now I think somebody told us to go looking for somebody else. And then after talking to several people, we finally got the information that this would be our hotel. Potentially, I think they weren't even sure what we were looking for. It was all in all a very weird way of communicating. I think nobody really understood what anybody was trying to say or ask. It was all a weird back and forth. It wasn't a language barrier. I think it was just a barrier of understanding. Because the thing up top on the hill is actually your hotel. We then decided to go into that building, into that hotel. This was the strangest hotel I ever was inside. Now, when you walk towards what seems to be the main entrance, there's like light turning on, like with a movement sensor tracker thing. So it is very modern in a way, even though the building does look like it's kept in a very traditional architectural style. And when you walk inside, everything's empty. The building immediately feels unfinished and as if it would be abandoned. Now this was before we started with lost place exploring, like before going into abandoned places really. So we weren't really experienced in that sector to begin with, but we weren't sure what to do. There were like parts when you walked up the stairs where there were just holes where you would expect either walls or like windows or something. There were just open holes one could walk through and potentially not be alive anymore, which was weird. And when you went then upstairs, there were just hallways and hallways of dozens of rooms that were unmarked. All of them were unlocked, but furnished with beds, with bed sheets on them. There was also nothing, literally nothing that did indicate there to be any check-in area. So we weren't sure where to go, but literally no one was in that building. No one was in any of the rooms. No one was anywhere where you could have potentially checked in, because the people at the monastery definitely described to us a check-in area. And when we went there were just empty rooms with very random looking furniture that didn't even look like offices or check-in areas. So we kept walking in between all of these rooms and looking into rooms, which was a fascinating experience. And honestly, I wish partly that we would have had a camera with us. We were actually considering to bring it and start filming the place because it actually felt like a lost place at this point. We were also convinced that our hotel was actually the one downstairs, probably. But the craziest part about all of this is, technically, we could have just went into one of these rooms and went to bed. I mean, somebody would have found us and we probably wouldn't have had a way to lock the rooms. But again, all of them were like furnished and open. Again, felt like a not finished hotel in a way. But then again, it wouldn't be furnished completely if it wouldn't be finished. So we weren't sure what to think. And then we went outside again, actually to pick up the camera, because at this point we were like, okay, we're gonna go in and film that. And then suddenly a car appeared, and that car was from the person owning it or working there. And when we went inside with him, I'm not even sure why he went there. I'm not sure if somebody told him that people were walking around, or if there were like cameras that saw us walking around, or if he gets like notified because, you know, again, there's a sensor activating the light. So maybe he just gets a notification, hey, there's movement. I don't really know. He brought us to the check-in area, which in my memory still didn't really look like a check-in area. And he basically said there's no booking for the hotel. And apparently we actually really booked the hotel down next to the road. The weird part about that is we looked in the area for bookable places, and this unfinished looking hotel that is seemingly finished because you can apparently book it was not listed anywhere. So to this day, I don't understand where we would have booked the hotel we were in the first place, or if it was bookable. But then again, he said he had no booking, so it must have been bookable. This entire situation was very confusing. My memory also escapes me a little bit because I'm not sure anymore if after we drove up, we drove down and then drove up again, because I feel like we did that. I feel like before this whole walking to the monastery and walking inside the building, we were so unsure about this building looking kinda abandoned in the first place that I think we drove down and then drove up again. It was a lot of back and forth. But after this conversation with the owner that obviously confirmed to us that this was not the hotel we booked, we then drove down to our actual hotel, which I also have stuff to say about. But I just want to add in here, for this part I'm also again glad that we didn't film inside the hotel yet, because I was gonna take the camera with me the second we went in. But if he would have seen us leave with the camera, I'm not sure if we would have gotten sued. Wasn't it technically breaking and entering? I mean, the hotel was open, but then again, we went into like several rooms to look into rooms, so I don't know where the legalities are with that, but I'm also glad we never got to find that out. But then when we drove down to the hotel, the thing that actually stopped us from doing that in the first place is there was a big private party going on. It looked even like a wedding. I think that's why I remember driving down and then up again, because we were like, nah, that can't be it. Apparently it was it. Apparently you were supposed to just, I guess, park on the highway or drive in. I'm not sure anymore, but we parked like on the parking next to the highway and then walked in. And then when you walk past the entire private party, was there a check-in area? I don't think that hotel had a check-in area either. We sat in a weird couch lounge area waiting for somebody to come talk to us because everybody was busy with that private party or wedding or whatever the hell it was. It felt all very unprofessional. We waited quite a while. Now, the second somebody talked to us, we actually got to talk to someone who made sure that we got a room that we wanted and that everything was nice and well. And the party was at this point already shutting down, so everything was quiet. We could sleep very sound. But the experience still wasn't good because everything was a mess. You had people walking around. You had somebody telling us, oh yeah, you need to get your passport. So we went to the car to get our passports. But when we came back, that person was nowhere to be found. Also sorry for the sudden lighting change. My battery went out. So I thought, oh wow, it's dark already. I can change that while we're at it. But yeah, weird experience. Honestly, I hope they will in the future kind of mark better which hotel you're actually supposed to be staying in. Maybe we were wrong there. Maybe we were the dumb ones and it was kind of obvious where you were supposed to go. I don't know. But again, the correct hotel did not have a proper check-in area. It was, in my experience, comparing with the hotels I stayed in within the past couple of years, this was one of the most confusing hotel complex areas I was in so far. Now for the third and last story for today, we're gonna move to 1 year later, summer of 2022. We're in Spain now. And this one is the worst of them, in my opinion. Now the thing is, we book a lot of hotels with booking.com, and obviously systems can malfunction. Websites like booking.com aren't without error. So it might happen. I don't know. I never worked in a hotel. I don't know how these systems work internally, but it might happen that somebody overbooks hotels due to a system issue. However, in my opinion, when you notice that you are overbooked and you just gave away the last room but you still have somebody coming, you should call that customer right away and tell them so they can prepare or you can offer them a solution. Now the hotel we were supposed to go in that day in Spain, we were planning to check in late and they knew that. They told us to call on that day so they could give us the door code or something. I don't really know how that worked anymore. Now the thing is, when we called them, they told us, oh, your room is gone. We overbooked. What do you mean? What do you mean? And why are you telling us only when we call you? First of all, fantastic. Thank you. Also, why didn't you call us and tell us or message us on booking.com much earlier about that situation and not like when it's already late in the evening and we're currently driving to that very town? And that wasn't even the only issue. Until we got very verbally angry, they didn't really want to offer any proper solution. We had to basically get them to get the idea to look for other hotels for us. Because in my opinion, when a hotel overbooks and you basically leave your guests stranded on the streets, you should be the one calling the other hotels and ask them where something is available, because it's not a customer's fault, especially when they're on the road and especially when they're not speaking the language of the country as well. I feel like that's a level of customer service. I should also point out at this point that when we called the hotel initially, communication was impossible because nobody was speaking English and we had to call multiple times to get an English-speaking person on the phone. Now, obviously Spain speaks Spanish and I wouldn't expect anyone to speak English, so that's not the issue, but this is going to become relevant a bit later on. When they started calling around to find a hotel that would still let us in at the time we agreed to be arriving, they called us back and told us, hey, here's the telephone number, call them, they will describe to you how you get into a hotel. Nobody at that hotel spoke English. None of them. Which, again, technically fine, but why would the hotel that overbooked and sends us to a different hotel not clarify that this different hotel has somebody speaking English when they know for a fact that we had to call several times to get somebody speaking English on the phone because we cannot speak Spanish? Obviously, communication with that other hotel is not possible because neither of us speaks the other's language. That was impossible. So we called back our actual hotel and we're like, we don't speak Spanish, they don't speak English. This is not working. So then they called them again and got the information how we check in and sent them to us on booking.com, I believe. Or I think they gave us a phone call and gave us like instructions. I don't know anymore. It was something like enter through the back door, everything is unlocked. Your key is there and there. It was a bit weird, but it was fine anyway. And that would have been all fine and dandy. However, the other hotel was more expensive. And again, in this case where the hotel was the one overbooking, in my opinion, they should give us the change in money. And it was a lot of back and forth until they agreed to do that. Whereas it was only like a difference of 3 or 4 euros. For us, it was way more about the principle of it. And also, the hotel can probably afford that 3 or 4 euros. But they, first of all, wanted to give us like a breakfast coupon instead. But we had plans and we usually don't really eat breakfast on our trips because we are already leaving at sunrise and usually breakfast is much later than that. I kind of hate that we had to go so much back and forth, but eventually they agreed to be giving us the change. And after we paid that new hotel, we then got back to the actual hotel and got the extra money. And I'm not going to talk about the whole booking.com cancellation because I think there was a language barrier. I think the overbooking was a mess and I get system malfunctions. I really do. I don't want to sound like somebody who over complains, but I just found the problem solving and the solution offering very questionable. And I found it very questionable that we had to get verbally angry to got offered any solution. Whereas their initial solution would have been, yeah, just book a new hotel, do that all yourself, bye. Because that seemed their approach at first, and that's not good. That's really not good. Don't do that. There were some honorable mentions of other hotels I had in my mind that I wanted to talk about, but that are not relevant enough to make a whole section of talking here about them. Like there was one where we got there 20-30 minutes before closing and they didn't find our booking for a while. That was very strange. There were other weird experiences. There was one, I think in Bosnia, maybe, where you would have to open a door with an electric key, but it didn't work at all. Or it worked in a very weird way and we had to call somebody at midnight and it didn't work at first and we were like, oh shit, are we stranded on the streets? But that worked out. Things like that happen once in a while. But these 3 stories were outstanding to me, so I felt like these were the ones I wanted to start with getting into story times again. So I hope this was entertaining. I wanted to say I hope you learned something from this, but what would you learn from this? Because I don't know, I don't think there was much learning. I wish you all more luck than we had with these hotels. Most of the time we have good luck with hotels actually, so. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. Comment down below if you want to see me make more story times again, because again, I have dozens and dozens of stories. I could talk about stuff like this for hours. Some of them are probably more entertaining than this, because looking back, I'm not even sure how entertaining this was. Look at me making this video sound worse than it probably is. I would love to hear about your weird or bad hotel experiences if you had any, so please leave them in the comments. I'm gonna react and answer to comments as much as I can. And if you want to see more videos like this one, or travel vlogs, travel dogs, cooking videos, urban exploration, beauty stuff, social commentary, candy tastings, product tests, I don't even know what I'm doing at this point anymore. I would just advise you to go check out the rest of my channel, see if there's more content you'd enjoy, and if there is, maybe subscribe and stay up to date with everything I'm gonna post in the future. Until then, hopefully see you next time. Bye!